Africa is far from being poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africans. And they are poor because of the uncounted profit that has been made out of the exploitation of their labor and their land.
Well then, a big fraud is the system. We are tired of being the victims of the faraway wars. Tear down the Berlin walls. Don't bother with them borders. Africa is free forever. Trade free, move free. My sister, my brother. We don't need no visa from north to the south. Take the train from the east to the west. Direct flight from Accra to Kingston.
One day the African continent must be a single market, must trade using local currency, must have a single currency, and we have taken concrete steps towards that particular vision.
Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that Africa is blessed. Africa is not a poor continent. In fact, she's too rich to be poor.
We can start to process and add value to these raw materials that are currently being exported to the West. We're looking at $500 billion worth of goods, retail value, that could be sold in and amongst ourselves.
Well then, a big fraud is the system. We are tired of being the victims of the faraway wars. Tear down the Berlin walls. Don't bother with them borders. Africa is free forever. Trade free, move free. My sister, my brother. We don't need no visa from north to the south. Take the train from the east to the west. Direct flight from Accra to Kingston. 5G internet, no matter where me dey. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa, yeah. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Yes, I believe, yeah. Africa, Africa, yeah. All Africa. Ghana. Nigeria, Congo, Tanzania, Egypt, Guyana, South Africa, yeah. Tell them no dollarization, true unification. We are the biggest single market. Say no more to the colonial racket. They don't care, them never will be fair. Let's come together and grab our share. Join the fast track to prosperity. We want food and energy security till eternity. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa. Yes, I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Senegal.
Where we are today is called the Peduasi Lodge. It was, over 60 years ago, the official retreat of Ghana's first president, Kwame Nkrumah. So being here today is a continuation of the dream of those men and women who fought for Africa's independence from colonialization and who believed that the best route for Africa was to unite.
Not about you, in spite of you, Africa will unite. Let this word sink in your head. Divide and rule is there. All Africa, Ethiopia, Mali, Cameroon, Kenya, Tunisia, Haiti, Namibia now.
Africa is far from being poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africans. And they are poor because of the uncounted profit that has been made out of the exploitation of their labor and their land.
Well then, a big fraud is the system. We are tired of being the victims of the faraway wars. Tear down the Berlin walls. Don't bother with them borders. Africa is free forever. Trade free, move free. My sister, my brother. We don't need no visa from north to the south. Take the train from the east to the west. Direct flight from Accra to Kingston.
One day the African continent must be a single market, must trade using local currency, must have a single currency, and we have taken concrete steps towards that particular vision.
Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that Africa is blessed. Africa is not a poor continent. In fact, she's too rich to be poor.
All Africa, Ghana.
We can start to process and add value to these raw materials that are currently being exported to the West. We're looking at $500 billion worth of goods, retail value, that could be sold in and amongst ourselves.
Well then, a big fraud is the system. We are tired of being the victims of the faraway wars. Tear down the Berlin walls. Make us don't bother with them borders. Africa is free forever. Trade free, move free. My sister, my brother. We don't need no visa from north to the south. Take the train from the east to the west. Direct flight from Accra to Kingston. 5G internet, no matter where me there. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa, yeah. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Yes, I believe, yeah. Africa, Africa, yeah. All Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Congo, Tanzania, Egypt, Guyana, South Africa, yeah. Tell them no dollarization, true unification. We are the biggest single market. Say no more to the colonial racket. They don't care, them never will be fair. Let's come together and grab our share. Join the fast track to prosperity. We want food and energy security till eternity. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Do you believe? I believe in Africa. Africa. Yes, I believe. I believe in Africa. Yes, I believe. I believe in Africa. I believe in Africa. Africa. Yeah. All Africa. Senegal.
Where we are today is called the Peduasi Lodge. It was over 60 years ago the official retreat of Ghana's first president, Kwame Nkrumah. So being here today is a continuation of the dream of those men and women who fought for Africa's independence from colonialization and who believed that the best route for Africa was to unite.
Not about you, in spite of you, Africa will unite. Let this word sink in your head. Divide and rule is there. All Africa, Ethiopia, Mali, Cameroon, Kenya, Tunisia, Haiti, Namibia now.
Welcome. Well, this year's forum is made possible by the Africa Prosperity Network in collaboration with the Africa America Institute and our various partners, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, AFTA, and the Pan-African Payment Settlement Systems, PAPS, and of course, our kind sponsors, and we'll get to go through them. Well, this year's theme, mobilizing global African investment for Africa's infrastructural needs, gets to highlight the crucial role of global partnerships in addressing Africa's growing infrastructural demands. And as the continent continues to expand, investment in transportation, energy, digital technology, and healthcare are vital to a sustainable development.
So today we gather to explore how global Africa communities can drive these investments and unlock Africa's vast potential. For purposes of housekeeping, please take note that if you step out of this building from the direction you entered, you can have assistance if you want to know where the washrooms are, and what have you. There is assistance there for you. My name is Wilberforce Asare. I work with Asase Radio in Ghana.
I am Emefa Apau. I also work with Joy News, Joy FM, myjoyonline.com, also in Ghana.
And together we are your hosts for this event. We anticipate that it's going to be a successful event.
I must also say that we are live on Africa Prosperity Network's Facebook and YouTube channels, also live on Asase Radio, all the social media platforms around the world. You're welcome once again. And we are scheduled to have the founder and executive chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network, Mr. Gabi Asare-Tridako, to give us a welcome address, but due to circumstances beyond his control, I'd like to welcome tonight, it's my pleasure, to welcome a board member of the APN and a man many of us in the media look up to. Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Kweku Sechiado.
Thank you very much, MFI and Wilberforce. Honorable Ministers, Mr. Kofi Apente, I'm not sure whether he's here, or his representative, President of the African American Institute, Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished business leaders, partners, fellow Africans, ladies and gentlemen. It's my distinguished honor to welcome you to the Global Africa Forum 2024 on behalf of the Executive Chairman, Gabi Asare-Tridako, who's unable to be here today. This event is convened by the Africa Prosperity Network, APN, of which I'm a director, and its main partner, the African American Institute, AAI, with support from the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat and the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS. Thank you very much for your support. Thanks also to JL Properties, Golden Coast Developers, Buena Vista Homes, Delta Airlines, and Sky Team. I must extend our special gratitude to President Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo for his unwavering and profound commitment and support towards the aims and objectives of APN and the Global Africa Forum. The Africa Prosperity Network is a non-profit organization headquartered in Accra, Ghana. Its mission is to be the leading private sector network driving Africa's economic transformation and prosperity, championing the cause of intra-African trade to promote Africa's development through progressive dependence on trade as against aid, in alignment with the African Union's Agenda 2063. APN is the vehicle that runs the Africa Prosperity Dialogues, an annual 3-day conference in Accra in January. The dialogues bring together business leaders, regulators, policymakers to take practical initiatives to drive trade and investment towards the building of a prosperous Africa, the Africa we want. And so I hereby invite you all, ladies and gentlemen, to the APD 2025, which will take place from 30th January to 1st February 2025. APD 2025 will focus on infrastructure for Africa's development. The theme is mobilizing global African investments for Africa's infrastructure needs. Last year, we launched the Global Africa Network to connect millions of global Africans and invited them to turn their attention and investments towards the original home, Africa. Many distinguished personalities responded to our call and attended the event last year. They included Mr. Albert Muchanga, Commissioner for Trade and Industry of the African Union Commission, Mr. Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the AFCFTA, who is unable to be here this time but is ably represented by Nanayao Dapa, Professor Benedict Okeorama, President and Chair of Afri-Exim Bank, and Ms. Ahuna Eziakonwa, Africa Director for UNDP. To you, we owe many, many thanks. Africa has a vast infrastructure gap, but we see this gap as a vast opportunity, an investment opportunity, an opportunity for trade in machinery and technology, and an opportunity to create jobs right from groundbreaking and when the first shovel of sand is dug and scooped. And so we mustn't bemoan the infrastructure gap. Rather, we must fix it. Mind the gap by investing to close it. That's our call to you today. That's APN's invitation to you. Africa is home to 18% of the world's population, but it accounts for less than 6% of global energy use. The energy infrastructure gap seems to be the most in need of financing in Africa. And this gap says a lot, because without energy, we cannot industrialize. The Grand Inga Dam, when built in the Congo, has the potential to light up the entire continent, plus change to sell to the Middle East and parts of Europe. The World Bank, the European Investment Bank, and the African Development Bank have provided funding for feasibility studies and environmental impact studies as well to hopefully see through. Let's do it. We need to invest in roads and bridges. We must build railroads and establish aviation and maritime links to connect our countries and move cargo and people. And the model for financing must shift from central government to the private sector. In 2023, Sub-Saharan Africa witnessed an impressive 54 billion in remittance flows. Remittances outperformed FDIs by nearly 1.5 times. Ghana's remittances reached an impressive $4.6 billion US, surpassed only by neighboring Nigeria with $19.5 billion US. Of course, our jollof outperformed theirs. The Nigerian diaspora should invest in Niger jollof infrastructure. We see an opportunity in establishing direct air links between Africa and the Caribbean. It's important for unlocking new opportunities in trade, tourism, and cultural exchange. We need to recreate that transatlantic bridge, even for our own catharsis, for our collective, to cleanse our collective trauma. We understand that Air Peace have begun exploratory flights from Nigeria to Jamaica and Antigua. Congratulations to them for leading the way. Back in the 90s, Ghana Airways used to fly to Bridgetown, Barbados from London. We need strategic partnerships such as code-sharing agreements. These should be explored. And so we say to our global Africa brothers and sisters and investors, turn your face to Africa. Seize the opportunity that the African Continental Free Trade Area offers and APN as well presents, and back them with your greenbacks. So see you all in Accra in January 2025 for our Africa Prosperity Dialogues. And remember to mind the gap by investing to close it. Thank you.
On that jollof note, thank you very much, Mr. Kweku Sejiano, member of the board for Africa Prosperity Network. For those of you who are joining us via... My microphone is off. Hello? Good. So for those of you who are joining us via social media and also via YouTube and on various portals, we want to thank you sincerely for choosing to be part of the Global Africa Forum. Let me quickly acknowledge persons who have been supporting and organizations who have supported this endeavor. First is the Golden Coast Developers. Thank you very much for your sponsorship and partnership. Devtraco Group, thank you very much. Buena Vista Homes, JL Properties, and Delta, we thank you also. Other institutions that have supported this effort: United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNDP, United Nations Ghana, Afri-Exim Bank, Badea, Africa Business Council, Africa Development Bank, Soft Power Africa Soft Power, I should say, Oxford Business Group, the Africa America Institute, Africa Legal Associates, 3i Africa Summit, and the Chartered Institute of Realtors. We also have the Ghana Investment Promotion Center and also the Chamber of Real Estate. Thank you all for your partnership. The man I'm just about to introduce to address us is one of 4 persons who have been selected to address this gathering. He is initially, there was something that was written about him that got corrected. And so I want to make sure that I do the right thing. All right, so I'm just about to introduce a very known face globally. He's here in our midst, and he brings us his thoughts as far as this program is concerned. He is the co-founder of Full Circle Africa. He is a Ghanaian, and he's also a German. So he's part of the 2 Gs. Please, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Boris Kujo.
2 Gs, okay. Good day, everyone. Esteemed guests, dignitaries, excellencies, I'm going to thank Gabi and the Africa Prosperity Network, as well as the African American Institute. I'm honored to be here today, stand here before you at the Africa Global Forum at a very pivotal point in this time of uncertainty and opportunity. Uncertainty because business as usual threatens to be business as usual, with global paradigms about Africa continuing to perpetuate old stereotypes and thereby supporting Africa's biggest challenge, which is perception. Opportunity because part of our collective consciousness as Africans is our ability to band together in order to change old narratives and tell a different story. We are all Africans, whether you consider the first humans who lived in East Africa 2.8 million years ago, or the over 1.6 billion people of African descent currently populating the globe. The African diaspora is the 3rd largest population after China and India, and its spending power equals almost $2 trillion. Now that's our story. With the youngest average age in the world at 19 years old, Africa has the fastest growing workforce, soon to represent 40% of the world's youth ready to be educated and trained. Streamlining those skills and focusing them towards creating ecosystems and building sustainable industries will allow millions of Africans to drive socioeconomic development across the continent. That's our story. These numbers represent our collective leverage across sectors and the promise of possibility and potential. But this potential will remain unreachable unless we operate outside of our respective silos and create synergies and partnerships with one another. Together, let's continue to strengthen the bridge between the diaspora and the continent and maximize our impact on our economies, our culture, and societies as a whole. That's our story. When my brother and I, who's in the room, where is he? There he is. When my brother and I founded Full Circle Africa, we realized that the African diaspora has a unique perspective on our shared history, which creates a common ground that is the fertile soil on which business grows. Our people-to-people connections are the foundation of sustainable enterprise, and we must use our vast network, our sense of entrepreneurship, and collective consumer spending power as a catalyst to create partnerships and increase capital for African businesses. That's our story. So let's continue to welcome our brothers and sisters in the diaspora to travel to the continent, to visit, to do business, because together we can rid ourselves from the 8 base shackles of neocolonialisms and control our collective destiny by optimizing financial infrastructure and investing in economic development. Let's embrace our cultural diversity and celebrate our collective heritage by tapping into our ancestral superpowers. That's African excellence. That's our identity. That's our story. Together we have everything we need. Natural resources, economic resources, human resources. We must build and control fully integrated value chains, focus on African ownership and on exporting goods and services, but no longer African talent or IP. Let's remember that the world has always looked to us for inspiration and value creation, misappropriating and exploiting our science, art, music, fashion, and entire cultures. But that's no longer our story. As Africans, we have the power to change our own narrative, to face Africa's branding challenge and shine a light on technology innovation, digital expansion, and the growth of our industries. As I look towards the future, I can see a tomorrow where all Africans are united in our need to forge our own path towards possibility, our desire to work together to grow the continent, and our collective purpose to take Africa from potential to prosperity. This is our story. Thank you.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's do better for Boris to go. I don't know if you're as starstruck as I am, but if you are, maybe you do it better for him. Maybe once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's just do it for Mr. Boris Kudo. Thank you so much for being a part of this particular forum. It's now the turn to introduce a man that needs no introduction. He's the CEO of Shelter Afrique. Thieno Habib Han will give us a brief message as well. Please, let's welcome him.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And it's very difficult to follow my brother Boris, who's an actor and well-known driver of change across the continent. But it's a pleasure to be here to share this podium. Really, it's an honor, and we are very grateful to be part of the APN network initiative, the Global Africa Forum here on the sides of the UN GA. Really to say that we are a development bank based in Nairobi, and we focus on urban development and affordable housing across the continent. And we are really looking at the opportunity for transformation, right, for our continent to play its role in the global financial architecture. So as a development bank, this is where we come in. As you all know, housing and urban infrastructure are critical to Africa's development agenda, playing a pivotal role in improving living standards, driving economic growth, and fostering social inclusion, with Africa's urban population projected to exceed 50% by 2050. The continent faces an escalating housing crisis, which is really a ticking bomb on all of us, currently experiencing a deficit of over 53 million housing needed across the continent. And this gap alone requires more than $1.3 trillion, right? So we're talking about more than $1,000 billion, right? So that's $1.3 trillion. And we need to mobilize those resources. And this is where we come in as Shelter Afrique Development Bank and our other sister DFIs across the continent. We have set up an alliance of African multilateral financial institutions, AMFI, which is composed of 7 of our institutions, including Afrexim Bank, DDB, and others across the continent. So addressing this challenge requires increased investment in affordable housing to accommodate rapid urbanization and population growth. PPPs and innovative financing mechanisms such as blended finance and green bonds can unlock global and African investments needed to close the infrastructure gap. By mobilizing private capital and expertise, governments and institutions can fast-track large-scale, sustainable housing developments and urban development investments. Moreover, aligning housing projects with sustainable policies and practices and local capacity building efforts ensures long-term social, economic, and environmental benefits. Fostering partnerships that advance Africa's housing and urban infrastructure will be key. And this is where Shelter Afrique Development Banks is committed to mobilizing the resources to achieve this goal. So what is more, we have the mandate to do so. First, through our mission and vision over 40 years of existence, and also recently reaffirmed by the African Union 2 weeks ago at the inaugural African Union Urban Forum, where we are entrusted as the leading anchor resource mobilization DFI to drive the effort of resource mobilization for the continent for urban and housing infrastructure. So this is just to say that the amount of work and the task is really enormous, and we all need to work together across the board to make sure that this is achieved. I see some of our partners, institutions in the room. I see Badea in the room. We work very closely with Badea. Sister Fatima is here, and many other institutions. And the whole idea for us is to come together in partnership to make sure that we can move the needle, because the needs are huge, right? I mean, we've been talking about $150 billion infrastructure investment needed every year in Africa, right? So this is a major challenge on all of us. So this is why we're here, and we're looking forward to partner with everybody to move this forward. So we appreciate what APN is doing to bring us together, and we're looking forward to be in Accra in January as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. It's now time to hear from the Tetraco Energy team. And thankfully, we have the chief executive himself here with us, Olakunle Olalekun Williams. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome him, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Unfortunately, I'm not Ola. I'm Stanley Amatefio. And my bosses are here, so I'm sure they're pretty surprised to see me walk up here when they mentioned Ola's name. But Ola couldn't make it, so I'll be giving his remarks on his behalf. Good afternoon, Excellencies, industry captains, government representatives, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to address this assembly today as we discuss issues bordering mobilizing global investments for Africa's infrastructure needs. This gathering provides an important platform for all of us to join the dialogue and proffer a pragmatic approach to accelerate infrastructure development in Africa, the beautiful continent I come from. I actually do come from the continent this time, so this is exciting. Let me take a moment to congratulate the Africa Prosperity Network, APN, and the Africa America Institute, AAI, for showing yet again the power of collaboration between institutions in addressing key issues such as infrastructure deficits in our society. To put some background, Africa has a population of over 1.5 billion people as of today, and it's expected to hit an unprecedented 2.4 billion by 2050, and eventually to a staggering 4.2 billion. That is about 30% of the global population by the year 2100. The continent will nearly become the most populated on Earth, trailing only Asia's 4.8 billion. And yet today, more than 600 million people across the continent still lack access to electricity. In sub-Saharan Africa, 77% of the population faces energy poverty, an alarming deficit that limits our economic potential, stifles development, and hampers our collective ability to address basic human needs such as healthcare, education, and clean water. There's no better time to discuss and reflect on Africa's energy sector and its pivotal role in closing the continent's infrastructure gap. Mobilizing global investment is key to addressing this and unlocking Africa's energy future. Africa's energy demand is projected to grow at twice the global average, and meeting this growing demand will require sustained and transformative investment. To put this into perspective, the International Energy Agency, IEA, estimates that Africa needs over $190 billion in investment annually between now and 2030 to achieve universal access to energy and to build infrastructure that will enable sustainable growth. This number is expected to increase to over $240 billion annually to meet up with the growing demand. These numbers highlight the scale of the challenge, but they also offer a compelling business case. Africa's energy markets present a $2.6 trillion opportunity by 2040. The path forward requires a collective strategic effort to unlock this potential and meet Africa's energy demands. To all decision makers, enthusiasts present here today, I would now like to focus on a potential way forward: collaboration. Solving Africa's energy infrastructure problem requires a three-pronged collaborative approach. The first pillar is funding and financing. The scale of investment needed means that no single entity, government or private, can do this alone. We need collaborative financial mechanisms that mobilize capital from a variety of sources: public, private, and multilateral. The creation of blended finance models, public-private partnerships, and innovative financial instruments like green bonds are all key to addressing Africa's energy deficit. For example, Tetracol Energy Group has been at the forefront of developing energy projects across the continent. Access to the required funding and financing will go a long way in ensuring we can do much more across the continent where infrastructure development is concerned. Our work in natural gas infrastructure and independent power projects, IPPs, has demonstrated that it is possible to attract and deploy international capital in ways that not only deliver high demands, but also provide essential services to millions of people. The second pillar is technology. Africa is rich in energy resources, from solar, wind, and hydropower to abundant natural gas and geothermal reserves. But tapping into this potential requires significant technological innovation. We must leverage technology to enhance energy efficiency, reduce emissions, and ensure that Africa benefits from a diverse energy mix. While renewables will undoubtedly play a major role in Africa's future, we must acknowledge that for a developing continent, relying on renewables alone cannot meet our needs in the short to medium term. Natural gas, for instance, will serve as a critical transition and stabilizing fuel, providing the baseload power required for industrialization. Tetracore Energy Group is proud to contribute to this narrative. We manage over 85 million standard cubic feet per day of natural gas supply across Nigeria, energizing over 300 megawatts of power generation. In Ghana, we secured the country's first virtual pipeline license, making a tangible impact on energy access. Our compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas projects that we set up in Nigeria, Ghana, and Equatorial Guinea are contributing to the reduction of emissions while providing a reliable energy source. By working with cutting-edge technologies, we aim to and can unlock the potential of all energy sources and bridge the gap between Africa's energy needs and its current supply. The third and final pillar is market collaboration. Open, transparent, and competitive energy markets are critical for unlocking Africa's full energy potential. Governments, private sector players, and international partners must work together to create markets that encourage investment, allow for competition, and foster innovation. Fair trade policies, deregulation, and incentives for cross-border energy trade will help drive down costs and increase access. Tetracore is committed to facilitating collaboration among market players and advocating for transparent and efficient energy markets. Our success with integrated energy solutions has been made possible through partnerships with both government and private sector leaders. With the African Continental Free Trade Area, agreements in place, we have the framework to integrate our economies and drive intra-Africa trade. The $15 billion pledge by the United States and European Union to Africa's renewable energy transition is a testament to the potential impact. If well coordinated, these investments could electrify more than 600 million Africans who currently lack access to reliable electricity. Cross-border energy systems like the West African Power Pool will also be essential for unlocking growth and driving industrialization across multiple sectors. The West African Power Pool, WAP, has received over $300 million in funding from the World Bank to develop a 330 kV transmission line that will connect Nigeria, Benin, Togo, and Ghana. The project is expected to improve power transmission and reduce energy losses in the region. At Tetracore, we are deeply committed to solving Africa's energy challenges. Our diverse portfolio of energy projects span natural gas, renewable energy, and power generation infrastructure. We are not only focused on building capacity, but also on ensuring that our projects contribute to the development of a sustainable, inclusive energy market in Africa. Whether it is our work in gas-to-power projects or the pursuit of decentralized renewable solutions, Tetracore is demonstrating leadership in bringing innovative energy solutions to the continent. We are actively engaged in partnerships and collaborations that will help mobilize the funding, technology, and markets frameworks required to transform Africa's energy landscape. In conclusion, Africa's energy sector is the engine that will drive our shared prosperity. Solving Africa's infrastructure challenges requires bold investments, collaborative partnerships, and efficient governance. By mobilizing global investments and fostering regional trade, we close the infrastructure gap, enhance energy security, and make Africa not only energy independent, but also a global industrial powerhouse. And it's about time we all roll up our sleeves and get to work. And may our road be rough, but may Africa be the winner. Thank you.
He is a private legal practitioner. He works with Africa Legal Associates, and it's interesting to see that he has taken over a new role in energy. All right, so the next guest I'm supposed to introduce to bring us an address works with a company that seeks to provide excellent healthcare infrastructure as a turnkey solution for both government and private clients. This company also delivers solutions that are technologically driven from design, financing, project management, and construction, with the aim of offering their clients seamless turnkey approach. What I see with this company is there's something about turnkey. So let's hope that the CEO of the Hospital Infrastructure Groups, the Hospital Infrastructure Group brings us the turnkey. Please make welcome Kwabena Nyako.
Thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished, Your Excellencies, distinguished business leaders, ladies and gentlemen. It's my distinct pleasure to firstly thank the Africa Prosperity Network and the African American Institute for inviting me to give remarks at this forum on the theme of mobilizing global African investments for Africa's infrastructure needs. Africa is often spoken of in terms of its potential. But as Abraham Lincoln put it, and I quote, "The best way to predict your future is to create it," unquote. And Africa must create its own future. By 2050, Africa's population is expected to hit 2.4 billion, and this calls for substantial investments in infrastructure development. Your Excellencies, African governments alone cannot bear the annual funding requirements of $150 for infrastructure. So there's a need to switch from traditional funding sources to more strategic and dynamic project structuring mechanisms. And here I'll share some experiences from Ghana and what has been done in the last decade. So for example, a decade ago, Ghana set up the Ghana Infrastructure and Investment Fund, GIF, which is a sovereign wealth fund capitalized with 325 million in anchor equity to act as a catalyst to leverage private sector funds into infrastructure assets in Ghana. Significantly, for every dollar invested, GIF has attracted $10 in private sector investment into Ghana without the anchor of any sovereign guarantees. At this stage, permit me to share two examples of project structuring and accelerated infrastructure delivery. At the height of COVID-19, the pandemic, the government of Ghana took the challenging decision to build 101 district hospitals, 7 regional hospitals, 3 psychiatric hospitals at an estimated cost of $1.8 billion, and aimed at bridging the healthcare infrastructure gap in the country. This project is known as Agenda 111, and my company was at the forefront of championing this project. Glad to say that government in this approach departed from traditional approaches to delivering a project of this scale. So government through GIF provided funding to execute the initial phase of a project, and GIF was tasked to oversee the payment process, ensure integrity, and eliminate the red tapeism. This enabled construction in a record time. And as I speak, the first batch of hospitals will be commissioned by the end of 2024.
Government has created equity and can leverage on it to raise additional funding for the project moving forward. To achieve this, I'm proposing a charter of hospitals where private investors can partner with government in a PPP to ensure speedy completion and operationalization of the hospitals in the short to medium term. The second example I like to cite is the 20-kilometer Accra-Tema motorway and N1 extension project. This is a road project that seeks to enhance a key portion of the West African Highway. And here again, government requested the Ghana Infrastructure and Investment Fund to develop a ring-fence SPV, through which funds will be channeled exclusively for the accelerated delivery of the project. The GIF SPV was granted a concession, and the project will be executed in 3 phases at a cost of $600 million. The government will provide $380 million as GOG equity for EPC works. And on completion of the first phase, government acting through the SPV will leverage its equity to raise additional funding for phases 2 and 3 under PPP arrangements. These examples show that the value of leveraging resources and expertise to drive localized project infrastructure projects. And here I'd just like to emphasize on the importance of these kinds of PPP arrangements where government in particular puts in equity in developing the projects and then can leverage on that to raise additional funding. Distinguished guests, in conclusion, African governments should adequately capitalize their sovereign wealth funds and other DFIs to focus on infrastructure development. African governments should leverage their resources and expertise through strategic financing alternatives to provide resilient and sustainable infrastructure projects. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your audience.
Hello everyone, I'm Neil Oku, the CEO of Golden Coast Developers, and we're glad to be a part of this year's Global Africa Forum. We believe the cornerstone of building Africa is to ensure that the investment base and the practical ideas turn into tangible projects. We're calling on all global Africans to come home, invest, and let's harness the opportunity to develop the continent in the goals that we have. Our project Heritage 100 is the first fully immersive, fully inclusive strategy development that is supposed to bring back the diaspora. We love the whole concept around developing the country as well as the continent, and the global view is what we're doing with Heritage 100. In keeping with the Global Africa Forum, we're all about harnessing the innovation and the development that we need in Africa. Heritage 100 seeks to bring in and mobilize all of the services and amenities that we expect being on a global stage. We believe we can inspire all diasporans to come home, and that's the true theme of building an investment group that will highlight and create the new Africa that we all seek. It's all about the growth, the prospects, the innovation, and that's why Heritage 100 will be the cornerstone and the beacon of all things. Golden Coast Developers, join us in realizing what Africa should and can and will be.
Career in the financial services space, he has achieved major milestones and contributions to shaping the banking landscape across Africa. If I go on, we will not finish. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Group Managing Director, United Bank for Africa, UBA, Oliver Alauba. Please, let's welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. I would like to first of all appreciate Global Africa Forum, the Africa Prosperity Network, and African American Institute for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I would like to say that we gather here today not just to address the challenges facing Africa, but also to spark a sense of urgency, an urgency that address and drive transformation across Africa. As Mr. Tony Elomoli, CFR, a leading advocate of Afro-capitalism, says, and I quote, "Africa can only be developed by Africans, and the African private sector has the potential to lead a transformation through long-term investments," unquote. His words serve as a reminder of the responsibility that we have, both in Africa and the diaspora, to invest in our homeland future. Africa's infrastructure needs are vast and pressing. In fact, the figures are staggering. Whether in energy, in infrastructure like telecommunications, in technology, or even in housing, the needs are enormous. The ADB estimates that Africa faces a 100 billion annual infrastructure financing gap, while the UNDP cites a gap of 68 billion to 108 billion annually. Although these numbers may seem daunting, they represent a clear call for action. Closing the gap is critical to unlocking Africa's full potential. To do so, we must think creatively, act innovatively, and form strategic partnerships to mobilize the necessary investments to meet these essential needs. You have to give me some time. I'm having some issues here. Just a few minutes, please.
Hello everyone, I'm Neil Oku, the CEO of Golden Coast Developers, and we're glad to be a part of this year's Global Africa Forum. We believe the cornerstone of building Africa is to ensure that the investment base and the practical ideas turn into tangible projects. We're calling on all global Africans to come home, invest, and let's harness the opportunity.
Infrastructure needs are vast as person, as I mentioned. For us in UBA, we are committed and positioned ourselves as a leading Pan-African financial institution with our presence in 24 countries, 20 of them in Africa. With our 75 years of experience as a financial institution, UBA remains committed to Africa's development. As Africa's global bank, UBA has been involved in several infrastructure projects in Africa, and they've had positive impact on the lives of millions of people in the continent. For example, in Tanzania, UBA provided project support for the 2,115 megawatt Ilole Dam on the Refugee River. The landmark initiative will significantly accelerate Tanzania's economic development, providing a catalyst for growth by expanding energy capacity and fostering industrial development. UBA has also played a crucial role in financing many infrastructure projects across Africa, helping to connect rural areas to improve the lives of countless individuals. Additionally, UBA has supported port expansion projects in many countries in Central and West Africa, which will enhance import and export trade, further unlocking the vast potential of intra-Africa trade. Furthermore, UBA has committed to a $6 billion funding package for SMEs in agreement with Africa Continental Free Trade Area to finance African businesses that drive towards driving the AFTA agenda. By facilitating increased inter-Africa trade, this initiative will create opportunities for businesses across the continent and strengthen Africa's position in the global market. The bank has also financed numerous railway networks and airports in Africa, all aimed at enhancing connectivity and fostering economic integration. Additionally, UBA's dedication to technological innovation is evident in its role as a leader in digital financial solutions. Through initiatives such as PAPS, that's Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, UBA has streamlined cross-border transactions, making it easier for businesses and individuals to engage on seamless financial activities across Africa. While these initiatives represent significant progress, they are only the beginning. UBA remains committed to expanding its support for infrastructure and development across Africa. Despite the continent's abundant resources and talented workforce, inadequate infrastructure and fragmented markets continue to hinder our development. However, with a population of 1.52 billion, projected to reach 2.5 billion by 2049, and with 30% of the population under the age of 30, with 70% of the population under the age of 30, Africa has an unprecedented opportunity for growth. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area, AfTA, is a crucial driver in this growth, offering immense potential for Africa youths. And that's why we were committed $6 billion to support and leverage on the skills of African youths for SME development. Nevertheless, serious challenges remain. More than 600 million Africans lack access to electricity, severely impacting health, education, and productivity. While initiatives from the World Bank and African Development Bank aim to provide electricity to 300 million people by 2030, Africa's infrastructure density remains far below other regions. To finance the essential projects that will close this infrastructure gap, we must explore strategic alternatives. The Global Africa Forum, organized by APN and AII, plays a vital role in changing the narrative. By connecting Africa with its diaspora and global investors, the forum aligns with the African Union's Agenda 2063, which emphasizes pooling global investments, leveraging diaspora resources, and promoting public-private partnerships. These are the pillars for securing Africa's future. We, as Africans, must take ownership of our development. Mobilizing resources from the diaspora, global investors, and local entrepreneurs is key to overcoming our infrastructure challenges. This goes beyond fiscal construction. It involves connecting people, ideas, and opportunities to create a prosperous future for Africans. Consider the potential of projects like this. The Grand Inga Dam in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which could generate 40 to 70,000 gigawatts of power. Or the Lagos Abidjan Road Project, which will significantly enhance trade and movement of people within the West African corridor. What about the $25 billion Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline? This ambitious 5,300 kilometer pipeline with a capacity of 30 billion cubic meters of gas per year spans from Nigeria to Morocco, traversing several West African countries, including Benin, Togo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Gambia, Mauritania, Senegal, Morocco. And it connects to the Maghreb-Europe gas pipeline that originates from Liberia, from Algeria down to Spain. And when it gets to Spain, it connects to the already existing pipeline from Spain to Portugal. So clearly from Nigeria, the pipeline connects down to Europe and supplies gas to all over Europe. Another key project is the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, which is a 1,443 kilometer crude oil pipeline that connects Uganda and Tanzania. This project, which represents a $4 billion investment, allows Uganda to unlock the value of natural resources while extending economic benefits to Tanzania. In addition to the pipeline, the investment will also lead to development of new level of infrastructure, logistics, technology transfer, all of which will improve livelihood of communities along the route. These transformational initiatives highlight the importance of inclusive, transparent, and effective partnerships in driving Africa's development. Africa-led investments, however, must be complemented by fostering an innovative environment and addressing the perception of risk, such as political instability and regulatory challenges in Africa. While the African Union's plans to launch a credit rating agency that will help address some of these concerns, it is equally important to improve local knowledge of business opportunities and risk in Africa to attract foreign investors. Governments, the private sector, international financial institutions, and the global African diaspora must work together to mobilize capital and expertise necessary to transform Africa's infrastructure. The diaspora, in particular, plays a unique role, not only as an investor, but as bridges connecting Africa to the rest of the world. In the words of Nelson Mandela, our revered South African anti-apartheid activist and first Black president of South Africa, I quote, it always seems impossible until it is done. Unquote. Today, we must take that leap forward. The time for action is now. Together, we can harness partnerships and investments to unlock Africa's full potential and drive sustainable development across the continent. Thank you, and I wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Group Managing Director of United Bank for Africa, UBA. So we're going straight up to our first panel discussion for today. We are expecting several dignitaries to join us here. And so when they are in, we would observe the protocols. But the panel that is coming up is going to be talking about future of US policy towards Africa and what Africa wants. And this panel is going to be moderated by a very seasoned and renowned lady that I have the pleasure to introduce. Once she comes on the stage, she would assemble her panel together. Please make welcome the CEO of KRL International LLC, author and columnist, Riva Livingston. So by way of housekeeping, there is this microphone is here on all the seats. It's a very sensitive microphone. And so if you put it up so close to your mouth, if you talk, it will sound like you are screaming. So for all our panel guests, please take note of it so that we can have an interesting one. Madam, please.
Does this work? Yep. Okay, I have the honor to call up my distinguished panelists who are also my friends. So we're actually going to be having a conversation amongst friends, and I hope you enjoy it. First, Ambassador Hilda Suka Mufutsi, AU Ambassador to the United States of America. Round of applause. Okay. Second, Dr. Joseph Sani, Vice President of the United States Institute of Peace. Sani. Mr. Tom Sheehy, also the U.S. Institute of Peace, but for this conversation, former staff director of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, understanding the legislative piece of U.S. policy. Last but not least, Denai K. Pauli, who's a senior advisor from the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment that had a big day yesterday on the world stage, and she's going to be talking about that and talking about it tomorrow as well. Okay. Round of applause. Dope. First, I want to shout out to the executive chairman of the Africa Prosperity Network, who, as we know, couldn't be here today, but whose vision we are all representing. So can we please give him well wishes and a round of applause? Thank you. So our bios are in the program, but what I want to talk about is not what differentiates us, but what puts us on this panel today. And I want to let you guys know that I wrote this introduction for you, not for you, so we can have a conversation, a real conversation about what's happening on U.S. policy. And as I think you know, my friends are from across public and private sector, also across government, across Africa, across the United States. So diverse backgrounds, but a few things we have in common. First, we are advocates for Africa, helping to prioritize the importance of the continent for the U.S. national security and U.S. economic interests. Second, we are operatives in the can-do sense of the word. And then in the word of a friend of mine who shall not be named on this panel, sometimes we call ourselves co-conspirators. Collectively and individually, we try to find the policy intersection between U.S. and African interests and develop a programmatic pathway using the tools that the U.S. government has at its disposal. This includes our trade and development finance agencies, our foreign assistance, our U.S. participation in multilateral agencies, along with U.S. diplomatic capacity, and to my friend here, our convening power. So, and the key is that we must all do this within the context of the realities of Washington, D.C., no matter who controls Congress, no matter who controls the White House. We're having this conversation just 40 days ahead of our presidential and national elections, where polls have everything in a dead heat, and during a campaign cycle which has seen the most unprecedented disruption in our country's recent history, from the withdrawal of the race of President Joe Biden, the selection of Vice President Kamala Harris. You can applaud if you want. And the unfortunate security lapse of 2 assassination attempts on the life of former President Donald Trump. All of this has disrupted the electorate, and nobody here and nobody in this room knows how it's going to go. Our panel here, we're not about picking sides. We are apolitical, right? We are apolitical. Our responsibility is to make U.S.-Africa policy future-proof. And that means building on the bipartisan consensus in place. So what I'm going to do is talk about the main parts of bipartisan consensus, and then I'm going to turn it over to each panelist and let them explain to you what that means. On the bipartisan consensus, we have the renewal of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. That is a big bipartisan consensus, the need for trade, the need to connect with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Whether that happens this year, don't know. Whether it expands, who's in it, who's out, all of that up for grabs. The other is the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. This is a strategic partnership with the G7 that looks at how to build a corridor across the continent, the infrastructure, the way to be able to beneficiate, build jobs, and compete. We're going to talk about that. The Mineral Security Partnership, another consensus piece. U.S. Development Finance Corporation, our critical partner, and it goes on and on. So now I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. You ready? We have 3 minutes, and I think it's possible that VIPs might walk in, so we have to be succinct. Ambassador, I want to turn it over to you to talk about where are we on the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, what you hope to see, and what the people in this room can do to support. Over.
Thank you very much for this question, and let me first thank the PA. Oh my goodness! Let me thank the Africa Prosperity Network and the Africa America Institute for convening such an important forum on the sidelines of anger. And the selected theme that is very important and which is very timely, mobilizing global African investments for Africa infrastructural needs. Thank you for directing the question around the AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act. We are at that stage whereby, as African Union and the member states, we are pushing for this AGOA to be renewed. We have countries at the moment that have adopted this AGOA and who are developing around issues to do with the trade investment. As you know, on the continent at the moment, we have a lot of innovation. And for the Growth and Opportunity Act, it has given us an opportunity for a market for our people, for the people who are coming from Africa, who are developing, who are pushing their goods through that innovation. And then what it means is we really are pushing for the AGOA to be renewed for at least 16 years. 16 years, at least 16 years. And if it can happen by the 2025 when it expires, if it can happen along this time around, we have been discussing with friends. We have been discussing with those who are concerned about the issue to do with AGOA. And we found that around the lame duck session, maybe things may happen.
Thank you, Ambassador. So for those of you in the room, the lame duck session happens on November 6th after our election, when everybody, the Congress can do what it wants in some ways without consequence because a new Congress comes in at the end of the year. So people like us who are advocates and operatives, we look at ways to move things in the lame duck session. As the ambassador rightly pointed out, the ambassador has been leading the advocacy effort for African ambassadors to ensure that this is a priority. So we're going to turn it over really quick to Denai. And Denai is going to talk about the Partnership for Global Infrastructure. And just to give you a sense, there was a historic announcement made yesterday with respect to the Libido Corridor, not just the Libido Corridor that goes through Angola, but the vision of moving it and lifting up the Copper Belt and eventually going all the way east. And so Denai is going to talk about what her team was able to accomplish. And we also have a few participants in the audience who were part of that announcement. Denai, over to you. I forgot the ground rules. Thank you for following. It's 3 minutes. And I have a stopwatch. Over.
Great. So yes, yesterday was indeed a big day, but let me take a step back and just an overview of what PGI is. The Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment is a G7 initiative launched in 2022, focused on mobilizing $600 billion for infrastructure in emerging markets, of which the U.S. committed to mobilizing $200 billion by 2027. And we started off on the continent. Our approach is to focus especially on strategic economic corridors, where we can layer infrastructure investments in transportation and logistics, in clean energy, in digital access, in health, in agribusiness, all together. And by layering these investments on top of each other, have a more catalytic impact on the economic growth of the partners that we're working with on the continent. And our first flagship corridor, as Reba mentioned, is the Lobito Corridor, starting in Angola, but connecting to the DRC, working closely with the Africa Finance Corporation on building a greenfield rail across Zambia, with the vision ultimately to connect the continent from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Yesterday, we marked a important milestone, specifically for the Greenfield Rail project, that has brought together originally 7 partners, including the EU, the African Development Bank, and AFC. But we recently have added Italy with a $320 million contribution to the rail. And yesterday we had an important conversation with Secretary Blinken, where we also invited Tanzania to the conversation to really understand the opportunities to extend this economic corridor beyond just Angola, DRC, and Zambia. We're also very excited with the historic announcement that Reba mentioned is the President's trip to Angola, which will happen in October. This will be the first visit of an American head of state to Angola, and an opportunity to really elevate the conversation about the Libido Corridor, not just in Angola, but really the vision for connecting the continent and how we can mobilize a coalition of partners to make it a reality.
Thank you, Denai. And Gabby, if we could have made that announcement on your stage, if you're listening, we would have done so. And shout out to our colleague from Africa Finance Corporation, if you could please stand up, Mohammed, and just wave. And they are the project developers on the Greenfield Rail. So thank you so much. Sonny, you go last. Tom. Tom is a distinguished fellow at the U.S. Institute of Peace, and he recently authored a paper about critical minerals. What should the U.S. be thinking? How should the U.S. engage Africa onto this theme on what Africa wants? And so Tom is going to talk to the key takeaways from the project, and then we'll go back. And then I just want to say that the last round of the questions is going to be to see how we future-proof all of these projects going into a new Congress and administration. And bipartisan consensus, most of them don't have legislative backbone. They're just presidential initiatives. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Reva. Thank you, Reva. And yes, we had a report, U.S. Institute of Peace had a report on critical minerals in Africa. And obviously, we know there's a lot of attention focused on critical minerals, the infrastructure that's needed to access the critical minerals. And there's just, I think it's important to realize that the U.S. is fairly late to the game here. Traditionally, we haven't developed infrastructure. We haven't been doing the types of good work that Denai is working on. And we haven't been focused on critical minerals. And that's for a variety of reasons. Traditionally, we haven't had U.S. mining companies active on the continent. All of a sudden, we have a strong interest in critical minerals. So what are we going to do about it? I think it's important to realize and just keep in mind in all these conversations, and it came up today, this has to be private sector driven. And so the U.S. government, through things like Development Finance Corporation, PGI, these great initiatives, Mineral Security Partnership, where we're working with our allies, that's all very helpful and in many instances necessary, but it's not going to guarantee success. Ultimately, the private sector is going to have to engage. They need this kind of support, but those decisions are largely going to be market decisions, and they're going to be dictated by things, the price of commodities, the investment climate. And so while we're talking a lot about what the U.S. is doing, I think it's very important. This is two sides of a coin. African governments have to work as well to provide the supportive environment that's going to encourage U.S. companies. And I mentioned there haven't been, and it's more acute with mining, but we're fighting to get all U.S. companies involved across the board in different sectors and overcome that risk perception that we've discussed. These have to be partnerships, and Africans have their side to play in terms of better rule of law and other aspects that are going to make their countries more attractive to investment. And so we have a series of recommendations, and again, the U.S. government has to do much more to have a coherent strategy focused on helping. And finally, these have to be mutually beneficial. They're African resources, they're not U.S. resources, they're not Western resources. We want to partner with African governments to develop resources in a mutually beneficial way that address our interests in our critical minerals needs, our energy transition needs, but most importantly, work to Africans' development needs.
Thanks, Tom. And again, Tom's relevance, not only critical minerals, but as we all know, as Denai knows, as the ambassador knows, any initiative presidential has to be capacitized in Congress, has to have bipartisan support, and all of the projects that go through our Development Finance Corporation, USTDA, XM, have to have no objection 30 days from the Congress. So that's why it's so important to have a conversation that includes and makes things future-proof. Sonny, we're going to turn it over to you. They said we have 10 minutes, but I'm going to try to be a little bit longer. But anyway, Sonny is going to talk about the intersection between peace and conflict and economic development and the programs that he's working on at the USIP to deal with the countries that need to stabilize from a security and governance perspective to benefit from private sector participation. And there are two things I wanted Sani to talk about in the 2 minutes you have. Sorry, Sani. One is the Global Fragility Act to prevent conflict and promote stability, but the other is your initiative, and particularly for our friends in this room, which is to support the democratic coastal states of West Africa, which provide a buffer to the Sahel, which is completely coup-based now. Sani, 2 minutes.
That's a tough challenge. I think, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for just for the flow of the conversation. I was very inspired to see African businesses on the podium talking about what they are doing for the continent. I think that sets the tone of the consensus we are talking about. I don't have to talk too much because I have 2 minutes. Yeah, for the consensus, I think it means we are charting our own story. And I think it's important because this is the shift we are also seeing in the US-Africa policy. Africans have to lead the way, and the United States will support. African countries invest more in their own development than foreign aid. So I think that's a narrative we have to break. It's true. Africans are the ones investing on their own development. So whatever comes from the United States is an add-on. But let me focus more on the initiative you mentioned, the strategy for preventing conflict and promoting stability. Why? It's important because stability, peace is crucial for any kind of development. Again, here, to speak from a business perspective, I think this strategy is relevant because it helps reduce the political risk of instability. Right? It's a bipartisan act from Congress, the Global Fragility Act, where the US government for the first time decided to invest on particularly promoting stability. It's about $100 million in coastal West Africa. The originality or the innovative factor of this act is that we are investing long-term. It promotes local ownership. So it's some form of compact between the receiving countries and the US government, identifying joint priorities where the money will go. It's also important in the sense that it encourages burden sharing, so partnerships. So in fact, the money is a catalytic investment on stability. So that's the original 3 points: partnerships, local ownership, and long-term planning. It allows African countries to plan long-term. For the moment, we can discuss in the second round, but I think one of the soft bellies of our US instruments sometimes tend to be unpredictability because we combine them to some sanction regime. Sometimes AGOA may not be funded or will be withdrawn because the country experience a coup d'etat or adverse consequences. But the Global Fragility Act injects this level of predictability. It's a 10 years engagement. So that allows countries to plan long term. I will stop there for now.
I think we have 2 minutes. So I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds for the last word. Just in terms of what we need to do in this room, we have these programs with the Mineral Security Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. We're trying to build more support for the Development Finance Corporation so that it is flexibility, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, all of these issues. What can we do? What can we do in this room to make sure that the U.S. Builds a policy of what Africa wants, but more on our side, again, going back where operatives trying to manage this, is how we build support in Washington, Republican and Democrat, to demonstrate that what Africa needs and the support is in our fundamental national economic security interest. And that's the space we all have to work in. So I want to turn it over to Ambassador for just brief closing remarks, and thank you for anchoring this panel. And then we'll turn it out and we'll roll and over.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And let me just say, at the moment, as we are pushing for AGOA renewal, it is an advantage to us. It's mutually beneficial, as he is talking about it, one of the panelists here. And we are looking at leveraging the AFCFTA. The good thing, Africa at the moment has its policy frameworks. And if we leverage what AFCFTA is looking at, the intra-Africa trade, where we trade amongst ourselves, and also the beneficiation that we're talking about in the industrialization that we would want to reach. And thank God we have our people who are already working on pushing and making sure that we get into that industrialization and that we are doing the beneficiation that we want. And as this leverage comes into place through AFCFTA and AGOA, which is getting so much support, bipartisan support, we are saying, let's move and domesticate this AGOA. Let's do the best capacity building to ensure our people build on more in the goods that they make, and the market is ready.
Thank you so much.
is open for the market.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I'm going to go specific questions. Denai, do you think there's the capacity to legislate, to build legislative support for the Partnership for Global Initiative? Every initiative that we've had, whether it's the issue of PEPFAR, whether it's the issue of the Development Finance Corporation, Electrifying Africa, everything that's sustainable has had companion legislation. So in 30 seconds, what's the pathway? Denai, you can do anything.
I mean, I won't speak for Congress because I'm not an elected official, but I do think to a certain degree, the way that PGI is structured in partnership with private sector is a key way to future-proof it, as you call it, and specifically with AFC as a lead project developer and the concessions that were signed yesterday really help insulate at least some of the major infrastructure that unlocks the other investments against any shifts in politics. That said, I also think a key way to endure the future is by being the proof point. If we are able to demonstrate that the U.S. can bring together partners to formulate creative solutions that are private sector driven to infrastructure challenges on the continent and around the world, that is the proof point that will lead the pathway to legislation.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Sani, before I'm gonna go to you, I'm gonna give you a tough one, right? So we've focused a lot on some of these countries in the Sahel and elsewhere that have had military coups, and we have robust initiatives to help move them back in the other direction. But what about the robust initiatives for coastal West Africa? Are we doing enough to support the democracies on coastal West Africa? You two aren't official and can't say much, but I'd love for you to share the recommendations of your paper, maybe the top 3 recommendations.
Yeah, I think it's important to calibrate our engagement with coastal West Africa. So there are countries that are already able, they have demonstrated an absorptive capacity. So the democracy like the Ghana, the Senegal, the Nigeria, where we have to provide the full ground of our foreign engagement, diplomacy, defense, and investment. For the Sahel, we have to recalibrate and recognize that these countries are not yet there. It doesn't mean we should stop engaging with them, but we engage recognizing the limitation of the institutions. Overall, I say for people in this room, I think keep on pushing the positive narrative. I think overall, everyone wants to invest in a champion. If we demonstrate that we are champions, we are writing our own story, we emulate and encourage people to join us. So for me, that would be my ask for the people in this room who are already doing great things. We have to be our own champions. Nobody will be African champions. Africans have to be their own champions.
Okay, absolutely. Tom, tough one for you, right? So we are investing in critical minerals. We have the Mineral Security Partnership. Are the challenges with China and Russia and other actors, are those going to need to continue to drive our ability to get support for these projects, or will these projects stand alone because they benefit Africans and benefit the U.S.? Over.
A little of both, Riva. I think depending on the constituency, some folks politically are motivated by certain things. Without a doubt, competing with China is a major driver of U.S. policy towards Africa. There's nothing wrong with that. But what we emphasize in our paper, again, it has to be good for Africans. We're quite aware Africans don't like to be put into this context of geopolitical competition. We invest because it's good for the U.S., it's good for Africans. Those are the kind of mutually beneficial partnerships we want, but there's always that reality of global competition, and people are going to think in those terms. So it's something to be recognized, managed, and hopefully can be a positive and not a negative.
Honestly, you have to respond to the energy in the room. If the energy is competing with China and addressing Russia, you have to take that energy, build it into your message, make it African-owned, and push it forward. You use what you can to drive the agenda. I want to have everyone give a round of applause to my co-conspirators. And thank you very much.
Shall we have a group picture of the panel, please?
I did not figure out how to turn this off. You guys could do that the whole time, right? Yeah.
Thank you very much. May I quickly invite our video to be played? Thank you very much. We will play our video shortly and then go on to do the launch of Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025. I will invite the group CEO of UBA. I would also invite Fatima of Badea and Kofi Apenteng of AAI to join me on the stage as they perform this launch. Our video, please.
This is Africa, endowed with vast natural resources. This is Africa, home to the world's fastest growing population. This is Africa, a potential green energy force to be reckoned with, from Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam, capable of powering the entire East Africa. West Africa's gas reserves, capable of powering vast regions, to the Democratic Republic of Congo's Grand Inga Dam project, capable of powering the entire continent. This is Africa, where the discovery of large oil and gas deposits are still being made. But this is also Africa, where we export significant crude oil and import even more significant petroleum products. This is Africa, where one of the largest well-managed airlines in the world continues its growth trajectory unhindered. But this is also Africa, where a business person from Algeria has to connect outside the continent to travel to Zimbabwe. According to the World Bank, the sub-Saharan African region needs to invest a staggering 7.1% of its GDP annually in infrastructure to meet its sustainable development goals. The African Development Bank estimates that closing the continent's infrastructure gap will require a minimum of $130 billion per year, leaving a shortfall of around $100 billion. While bridging this financing chasm presents a Herculean task, change is already simmering beneath the surface as several initiatives gain ground. Because this is Africa, where infrastructure investments in transport and logistics, industry, science and technology present an immense potential for both private and institutional investors. Africa's path to prosperity rests on two pillars: substantial investments in transportation infrastructure and the ratification of ambitious trade agreements like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. This is Africa, where our shared prosperity lies in integration. Africa faces significant trade hurdles as barriers, tariffs, and restrictions on the movement of people and goods continue to slow policy efforts made by the African Union and regional economic communities to forge a unified continent capable of thriving in the global marketplace. The AfCFTA, with its potential to create the world's largest single market of over 1.4 billion people and a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion, is a game changer, complementing trade integration by reducing transportation time on roads, ports, and border posts. Promises to boost exports by 11.5% and GDP by 2%. To fully harness these benefits, Africa must develop an integrated continent-wide infrastructure network. This will require increasing annual infrastructure investments from 3.5% to 4.5% of GDP, or an additional $40 billion a year. Public-private partnerships and the mobilization of domestic resources and local capital markets are pivotal for the continent's development. And because this is Africa, connectivity matters, with the continent's digital economy undergoing a seismic shift. Projections by the African Development Bank show that the digital sector will surge from $115 billion in 2023 to $712 billion by 2050. Africa's rapid adoption of mobile financial services is fueling financial inclusion and growth, highlighting the transformative potential of digital infrastructure. Africa's astounding leapfrog in mobile telephony and, now, mobile financial services is evidence of the continent's endless opportunities for investments that connect us. This is Africa, where challenges present immense opportunities. By investing strategically, integrating effectively, and prioritizing connectivity, Africa can unlock a new era of shared prosperity for its burgeoning population. The Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025 provide a roadmap for this transformation, a call to action for governments, the private sector, and international partners to unite behind a common vision. We welcome you to the next Africa Prosperity Dialogues, which takes place in Accra from the 30th of January to the 1st of February 2025. Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025.
Delivering Africa's single market through infrastructure. Invest. Integrate. Connect.
Thank you. So we expect you going to officially announce the launch of Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025.
So we'll launch the Africa Prosperity Dialogue 2025.
It gives us a great honor and a pleasure to launch the Africa Prosperity Dialogue on a very interesting, challenging topic to the continent, but nothing is challenging for Africa. Africa will thrive, Africa will survive and will shine. Join us and we'll see you soon in Accra. Thank you.
Oh, everything must be said 3 times to be real. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure to declare the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025 duly opened.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that kind gesture. Thank you very much. I'm going to invite launch Prosper Africa. And then after that, we have 2 other discussions. So, microphone off. All right. Okay. So please, let's welcome the group from Devens to formally the Prosper Africa. Yes, so Prosper Africa instructed. All right. So,
thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. I guess we're getting to that point already. It's been a long day for everybody and a long week. Good afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to thank the President for your remarks and for your foresight in launching the Global Africa Network along with Africa Exim Bank and UNDP, and to thank all of you at AAI and APN for the invitation to speak here this evening at the Global Africa Forum. I'm British Robinson, the coordinator of Prosper Africa. Prosper Africa is a presidential national security initiative designed to catalyze two-way trade and investment on the continent of Africa. We do that through working with our partner, 17 U.S. government agencies, to create innovative tools, products, and instruments to assist, support, and enable African economies to be full participants in the global capital markets. With that, I also would like to say that I'm honored and joined to be on stage by two very innovative partners and thinkers, Frank Aswani, the CEO of the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, and Faustini Fin Naimi, Executive Director for Africa at the Children's Investment Foundation. Private capital is critical in closing the multi-trillion-dollar investment gap that is needed to achieve climate and sustainable development goals across the developing world, but most crucially in Africa, where we know that 35 of the 50 countries are most at risk for climate change effects are located. If just 1% of these assets were invested in Africa, we would close the investment gaps entirely, leveraging the scale and sophistication of a whole new set of actors. Those new sets of actors, many of whom are sitting on the sidelines. Foundations and philanthropists have a critical role to play in this, both as capital allocators and as catalytic capital providers. However, it's a role that's not always fully understood. So today, in partnership with the Children's Investment Fund, or CIF, Prosper Africa is pleased to announce our support of the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, or AVPA, their efforts to mobilize Africa's domestic capital with our own support and U.S. capital for Africa's economic and social development. The fund that we're about to announce, that we are jointly announcing today, and that Frank will tell you a little bit more about in a minute, is a powerful step forward in mobilizing resources and unlocking private capital to drive sustainable development across Africa. We are honored, Frank, and our partner at AVPA, to be a part of this initiative. I think the conversation a few minutes ago talks about how Africa can fully participate in its journey and its growth. And we at Prosper Africa are honored to be a small part in helping you create those deep economies and those deep markets. And we can't think of a better way, not only through our own work, daily work, but supporting you in this very innovative, very creative effort. So thank you for your partnership. And Frank, I'll let you speak a little bit further.
Thank you, British. Can you hear me now? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, British. And to the organizers, thank you very much for having us over. My name is Frank Aswani. I'm the CEO at AVPA. We're a Pan-African network of impact investors who are mobilizing capital towards social investments on the continent, and in essence, trying to help Africa close this SDG financing gap. We are, ironically, at the UN GA Week, and Africa is on course to meet only 2 of the 17 SDGs. Only 6 years away. And this is being done, is happening rather in the wake of declining aid, tight fiscal spaces, and a rising population. We're adding about 1 million people a month to the continent. We have less money for more Africans. We have to ask ourselves, how are we going to close the $2 million annual SDG financing gap? And the only way we can do that is to mobilize private capital. We're not going to achieve the SDGs without the help of the people in this room. The world of impact isn't short of money or short of risk capital. We only need 1% of what's available globally in the financial markets to close the SDGs. So how do we de-risk that these social investments so we can get more of this kind of capital into the impact space? And what we're trying to do is to build this large amount of capital and enable private capital to come in, not in a manner that is meeting your mandates. We want you to make money yourself for human need. And this is what we're trying to do through this particular fund and initiative. So we're super excited to have the partnership here. And in particular, what we want to do is unlock the $1.8 trillion sitting in dormant capital on the continent. There's $1.8 trillion sitting in pension funds, insurance companies, dormant bank accounts. And in many ways, our capital should lead. We've lived the problem, we should leave the solution. So this particular initiative will look to unlock and de-risk social investments, and primarily, first of all, crowding private capital into the impact space, and domestic private capital for that matter, before we can even go seeking for international capital. So we're very delighted for the opportunity to work with SIF and Prosper Africa to get this initiative off the ground. We want to build a $20 million fund seeking about a 10x leverage of private capital. So initially we want to build about $2 billion, just as the beginning. Our aspiration is to go way beyond that. And this is an initiative where we're trying to play to the best of both worlds, combining the risk appetite for philanthropy with the scale of private capital in impact-linked innovative financing mechanisms. And we're demonstrating that it's possible to make money they solve for human need. So I'm really grateful to British and Prosper Africa and Faustina for trusting AVPA. We're headquartered in Nairobi with offices in Johannesburg and Lagos. We're Africa's leading impact network to try and do this. And what is really exciting about this as well for British and Faustina is we're not just solving for Africa. Whatever we prove to work in Africa is globally scalable because we offer extremes of conditions on the continent. That's so important for us. And this vehicle will test and proven innovative financing mechanisms and help them build a track record so they can be scaled and replicated, but where they're proven will help them scale to more countries, more places. So thank you very much for the support that you have, and it's good to be around. I noticed there are not many ladies on panels in this session, but this is really good to be here today with you folks. So thank you so much.
Thank you both, and if you don't mind, I will stand while I speak because I'm not so disciplined with those mics. My name is Faustina Finyame. I'm the Executive Director for SIF Africa. I'm based in Nairobi, and it was so wonderful when I walked in and I heard people speaking my local dialect tree. I felt so much at home, so thank you so much for that. At the Children Investment Fund Foundation, we deeply care about what is happening on our continent. And this week, if you've attended any meetings at all, you would have heard one narrative over and over again. The world is in a really challenging place. Africa is in a really challenging place. But at the same time, we see so much growth and opportunities on our beautiful continent. But it will take us to do things differently than we have done in the past, especially when it comes to development, health, climate change. We can't do the same thing and expecting different results. We're in a complete different space. And it's going to take real ways of financing those challenges. It's not going to come from development partners. And philanthropy, I would like to suggest to all of you, is the silent P in public-private partnership. There's philanthropy. Philanthropy in Africa. And believe you me, all of us in this room are philanthropists. If you're paying somebody's school fees, if you're paying for somebody's health bills, if you're paying for your auntie's this, you're a philanthropist. But we don't call it that way, and we don't pull it in the same way, and we don't talk about it in that way. But with this new exciting platform that we have created, this will allow us all to unlock the dormant, lazy capital that is sitting, whether it's in the global West or in Africa, and make it work for us. Let that money sweat for us to be able to develop our continent. What we need right now, we have talent on our continent. We know the solutions. The solutions have been talked about in this room today. What we need is financing. That's what is missing in all of the conversation. And how do we get that financing? And this is why we're setting up this platform. So please, I encourage all of you to be part of this. This is the solution. This is how we move forward. So thank you so much for your time. And British, Frank, thank you for being great collaborators and colleagues. And I look forward for us doing great things together and unlocking billions for our continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Faustina. Thank you so much, British, and thank you so much, Mr. Swani. I promise you, my next moderator for the high-level panel discussion on shaping Africa's future, learning from experience, has a lot of joy. Let's welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Joy Kategewa. She's the Director, Regional Integration, Africa Development Bank. For the next panel discussion, please. Well, thank you very much, and good evening to you all. Indeed, I have a lot of joy to be here with you today. We're talking about shaping Africa's future with an eye on experience. We're talking about trade, we're talking about finance, we're talking about diaspora, we're talking about partnerships. All of this with an eye on infrastructure. We're trying to close the infrastructure gap. And so it's my honor and my privilege to invite such a distinguished set of panelists, starting off with Mrs. Marilo Akin-Olugbade, Vice President, Regional Development, Integration and Business Delivery at the African Development Bank. She's also my boss. VP, please join us. We also have Mr. Jonathan Schmidt. I know you're in the audience. Please come out. Co-founder and CEO of Adtingo Limited. Then we have Mohammed Abdul Razak, Senior Vice President and Head of Capital Mobilization and Partnerships at the Africa Finance Corporation. And then we have Walid Hareb Al-Fahlahi, who is the CEO of the Dubai Consultancy. So as Walid comes to join us, we're going to try and dive right into the conversation because, as I said, we're really trying to crack this question around infrastructure. And so I'm going to come to you, Marilo, first and say, you know, some people call the AFDB the infrastructure bank. This is because of the track record of investment over the years in infrastructure. And I want you to tell us the learnings of what are we learning through the track record of the bank. I know that you talk about prepare, de-risk, finance, PDF. So what is this and how does it take us to the next level in financing infrastructure in Africa?
Thank you. Thank you very much to the organizers for this invitation to the bank, and thank you very much, Chairman. Indeed, I think we at the African Development Bank believe that one of the critical contributions that the group can make to Africa's development is to help bridge this huge infrastructure deficit. I think the video said it was $130 billion, 170, probably more than 200 billion. Whichever figures one chooses, it is a huge figure. And what we have tried to do, and I will maybe just take the past 8 years, which also correspond to the term of President Adesina, the time that he has spent. We have invested over $50 billion in infrastructure financing, promoting regional integration, and also facilitating trade in Africa. And this includes investment in more than 25 transport corridors on the continent. I think it's close to 19,000 kilometers of road, border posts, bridges, but also electricity, more than 25 power interconnection. So this is a significant contribution. But since I think I see a lot of friends from Ghana, I would like to, of course, make a special zoom on one project that is very dear to my heart, and which is the Bokwase interchange in Ghana, which was the last projects that I had the pleasure of supervising with my team. And the financing was for $93 million. So the African Development Fund contributed $81 million. The government of Ghana
$11 million and to produce really a first class, the first 4-tier interchange in West Africa and the second in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is the type of infrastructure that we're talking about. And a small mention again, even though if you joined the only lady on the panel tonight, the team was an all-female team on the bank side. The project was finished within budget and on time, something that is also very rare on the continent. And of course, there's another project that is also dear to my heart, and this is what we want to do more of. It is those very complex cross-borders projects, and this is the standard gauge railway between Tanzania, Burundi, and DRC. And I think we heard earlier on about the Lobito corridor. These are some of these projects that we would like to be able to do now, to be able to unleash all the growth potential in the whole region, creating jobs, leveraging the value chain. And in this project, the African Development Bank was able to, by combining different instruments, grants, loans, guarantees, we're able to provide 696 million contribution to the financing of this project. And we are also the initial mandated lead arranger to mobilize about 3.2 billion for these projects. These, I think, are some of the infrastructure projects of the future that are going to enable the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. I'll finish with the PDF. I first heard the expression from one of our African ministers, and indeed, it's a very nice way to summarize some of the lessons that we have. We can use to project ourselves. It is PDF, and it simply stands for prepare, de-risk, and finance project. The key issues that we have on the continent is the availability of investable projects. So we need to spend a lot of resources in preparation of projects. This is why the African Development Bank, in addition to financing projects, we like to set up institutions. How many of you know here that it is the African Development Bank, late President Babacar Ndiaye, who set up Afrexim Bank in 1994? This is a creation of the African Development Bank, just as the Africa 50, another institution set up to help prepare projects to bring them to financial close, is also a creation of the African Development Bank. We de-risk project, and once we de-risk project and the project are well prepared, it's relatively easier to finance this project. There is ample capital.
Okay, interesting. Prepare, de-risk, finance. I'm coming to you, Abdul Razak. You have a smile on your face, Senior Vice President and Head of Capital Mobilization at AFC. AFC has developed a track record in navigating the complex space of building partnerships for infrastructure. So I want you to tell us what works. How do you go about it practically?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to the organizers for inviting me for this event. For those who don't know AFC is the Africa Finance Corporation, a leading multilateral finance institution which was formed in 2007 with one mandate. The mandate was to plug the infrastructure gap and provide pragmatic solutions for infrastructure projects on the continent. Since we were formed, we have invested in over 36 African countries. We have deployed over $13.3 billion. Those projects have added up to $40 billion of GDP to the African continent and created over 5 million jobs. How have we been able to do that? We've been able to do that predominantly through our unique business model. Our unique business model provides end-to-end services, starting from project development and financial advisory. Our co-panelists mentioned this. Developing of projects at the early stage for infrastructure is absolutely critical and the key to getting infrastructure projects done on the continent. As we all know, 90% of projects on the continent fall away in the development phase because you require a lot of financial, technical, and commercial expertise. So we spent a lot of time in developing our project development team. We also have a financial advisory team which also spends a lot of time with clients to de-risk and structure projects. Once you're able to de-risk and structure projects, you can put it to different investors, starting with AFC, but also crowding in other investors. So for every $1 of investment we put in, we're able to crowd in $4. And that's how we've been able to do it from our business model. Now, in terms of experience and live examples of where we've been able to do this, I'm going to use a sponsor project that cut across 3 key countries: Angola, DRC, and Zambia, which cuts across 4 critical infrastructure spaces, which is ports, rail, copper mining, and power, which cuts across 160 million people and 200 billion of GDP, and which obviously is starting from the Lobito corridor, which on the Zambia side is a greenfield project where we're selected as the lead developer by the US PGI and the EU to develop that project. In 1 year, since we were selected, we completed the feasibility study, we signed the concession agreement yesterday, and we got grant funding from the USTDA for an ESIA. We did that in 1 year. On the other side of the Lobito corridor that starts from the port of Lobito in Angola to the border of DRC, we served as financial advisors to the concessionaires, Trafigura and Mota-Ngil, in de-risking that project. Through the de-risking, we were able to raise $750 million, $550 from the DFC and $200 million from DBSA. We did that in 2 years. The last project, we funded the I see there's 10 minutes up. We funded a critical mine in DRC, which is the Kamoa Copper Company, and that project doesn't only include the mine, but it also includes a processing unit. And as we know, we've spoken about the fact that we need industrialization, we need beneficiation. Not only have we invested in a copper processing unit, we also invested in a 178 megawatt hydro dam. So this just shows you these 3 projects cutting across 3 countries, greenfield, brownfield, and established, shows you how AFC has been able to operate and navigate the complexities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I very much like the idea of the integrated approach behind Lobito holds a promise for development. So Jonathan Schmidt, I'm coming to you talking about agriculture, because Atengo is big on agro-productivity. And I'd like for you to share with us in 2-3 minutes, how you strike the right investments for agriculture in Africa.
I'll do my best to be as disciplined as possible about the time. We do design, invest, develop, execute, and operate infrastructure projects. We're actually partnered with Africa Development Bank in several projects, and I do applaud all the work you've helped with. We also operate in Asia and South Asia, and so that gives us a perspective particularly about Africa. For Africa, we need to provide a little bit of context. Agriculture, food and agriculture is not the game that it used to be for the past century. We're at a tipping point, and it's a poly-crisis. Africa is part of that crisis, but it's a global crisis. And so it demands fresh thinking and seeking new designs about how we're going to mitigate that crisis. What kind of crisis am I talking about? Well, up until the past half century, it's been about clearing land, cultivating more, and then trying to increase your productivity. We already have 30% of all land dedicated to agriculture globally. We have 70% of all available water in agriculture. We have 8 billion people, and in 2050, we're going to have 10 billion people. We can't play the same game. The second bit, which is also part of the problem, but the opportunity, is the enormity of waste in African, but also in global food chains. We waste 30% of all harvested food before it reaches the human consumer. 30%. That's the global average. For many food types in Africa, that number is north of 40. So we have the ability, if we can capture that food and bring it back into the human value chain, we can increase the productivity that we have and the impact that we're having. We have clients now in North Africa, they're in their second year of 30% plus food inflation on year. It's politically destabilizing. Ghana has seen their cocoa crops, because of climate change, go down from 1 million tons per year to under 600,000 tons per year. The climate change is the big factor that is combining with population, the remnants of COVID, political disruption in supply chains. All of these are creating a superstorm. Final comment. It's not all dark and scary. So there are technologies, there are capabilities, but it does take a combination of these type of PPP frameworks, and we need the governments to be having the will to undertake these complex guarantees that they need to do, and if they do, they will unlock the private sector capability and capital to address these kind of solutions. Once you bring stability to what you eat, what you grow, then you can do the other productivity investments of upstream cultivation and downstream productivity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Walid, I had so many questions in my mind to ask you, but we're pressed for time. So I'm just going to take you to the region you come from and how it literally shaped its future by design. Coming from that perspective and knowing, I read your bio, it says you're a strong believer in the world being a small place. So I'd like for you to share experiences from the region you come from and how it can inform what Africa wants to do in terms of filling its infrastructure gap.
I think probably, first of all, thank you very much for the organizers for inviting me. Also very honored to be part of a very interesting panel. I think probably we did it on purpose that we go on low profile, and my brother was with us yesterday. We announced actually something very interesting called UAE Africa Economic Corridor. For some of you know or not, UAE is probably in the top 3 investors in Africa. And in certain areas we are investors even bigger than the big boys by miles. But the leadership that we have, they don't believe in creating business and all this. We focus on getting the job done. Africa is not a country where all continent we only invest. It's our people, we share common areas with Africa. So what we did is most of our investment was based on infrastructure, ports. I mean, literally in Africa, we have about 18, 20 ports that between DP World and Abu Dhabi ports. We have into agriculture, etc. But now what we did, we actually taken the whole streamline. Most of investment coming to Africa is focused on infrastructure. But guys, it's not, you have e-commerce, you have trade finance, SME development. So what we did is we didn't only focus on infrastructure. We have certain companies that are professional, that even more professional than me, that I cannot talk on their behalf. But what we focus in developing infrastructure. And what we did, part of this corridor that we launched, we divided this corridor into 2. UAE side, Africa side. And what we did, we briefed every ministry, every company. Don't come to us talking about the billions. Every time I sit in these conferences, I hear the billions, we're going to invest 100 billion. No. We said one project at a time. This gentleman here, we asked the CEO for one project. Don't talk to us about, I want, and also don't come and ask us for money. Come up, bring a project, we'll study it, we'll invest. But, so what we did, we allocated all of our partners' projects, and in the Africa side, for example, taking to consider Badia, we sat with Badia and said, listen, there is a common ground for us to work on specific project. We'll put, this is how we go about things in our part of the world.
Very interesting, and I'm so glad that is how I asked the question, because I see how to knit the thread. I've been told it's 5 minutes, so I'm going to come back to everybody, and I'm going to talk about hope. We have to live with hope. So I'll start with you, Mary-Laure, and say, look a little bit ahead and give us a hopeful future of infrastructure finance. And then I'll come to you and say why you're hopeful, why you're hopeful, why you're hopeful. Then we'll close there. A minute each, please.
Thank you very much, Joy. And I'm very hopeful for the continent. I believe that infrastructure finance will be more African. It will be more private sector led. It will be more green, and it will be also very climate resilient. Why do I say that? And it has been said before. Something that people do not sufficiently realize is that African governments are already financing a lot of that infrastructure, about 40% thereabout. Another 40% by DFIs, some of us are here, and it's only 20% that is financed by the private sector. So with pension funds, sovereign wealth fund, insurance companies sitting on $2.5 trillion, infrastructure finance must become African. It will be green, it will be private sector led, and what some of us will continue to do is to indeed continue to ensure that it is with the risk. We provide those instruments. We provide also structuring so that we can have local currency financing to de-risk again some of this investment, and we co-create platforms to be able to bring some of these investment to the continent. So I'm extremely hopeful, and I know that the Africa we want is an Africa that is interconnected, that is going to start using all these regional infrastructure corridor that we are financing. We will use innovative financial instruments, and we will unleash amazing economic opportunities and develop competitive national and regional value chain. So I'm very optimistic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, VP Madafor. Jonathan?
I'm trying to keep it brief, but I'm just going to pick up on this idea of interconnectivity and what we're seeing. So from Friday, I'll fly to Uganda. And then from Uganda, we're working on a project that involves Uganda, Burundi, Kenya, about leveraging a food corridor that's coming in through Mombasa. And it's going to involve Dutch financing to develop the port corridor. So we are already seeing the kind of coordination that needs to happen to have transformative agriculture, because it's about scale. And I think people are starting to get that, and they're starting to be able to put together the complexity that needs to happen to realize those projects.
Excellent. Yes, please.
I'm hopeful because of trust. There's increasing trust in the ability to get things done, and there's increasing confidence about getting things done by people within and outside the continent. And I think the understanding that Africa is funding Africa, the fact that people don't realize that if you continue to be consistent, you attract that private sector capital and public sector capital to get things done. So I'm hoping because of trust.
Trust, yes. What about you, Walid? Why are you hopeful?
I'm just going to follow his comment. I think Africa always should be hopeful because of youth, because of population. But I think there is few things that it's simpler. Fixing Africa is not as difficult as people think. I'll give you an example. This is, I have to tease a little bit my brothers here. You know, when we go and we advise our company to invest, you know what they tell us? Can you show us an investment map? So this is the same philosophy I used. I asked you guys, can you show us your investment map? What does investment map mean? The projects, the location, the visibility study, and what is the potential? Why this is important? Because any overseas investor or local investor is looking for any international or local. They want to know, I will not name the country. We went there to invest in 100 megawatts solar. The government gave us allocation of land. Even animals cannot live there. The land is impossible to have anything there. Why? because they're directed by someone. So we need that level of professionalism. Believe me, there is no better place. I'm telling you, even in the Middle East, it's not as good as Africa.
A good place to stop the conversation and to wrap up really in a second or two by saying we have the script going forward. Prepare, de-risk, finance. The next part of the script is partnerships, not just PPPs, but all of the stakeholders involved. The third piece is an integrated approach is critical. We're not doing the infrastructure of extraction. We're doing the infrastructure of integration and economic prosperity. The fourth piece is technology. Technology can help us to go further. And then the final one is hope. Hope, hope. It's possible because Africa has owned it. African governments are investing most in it. And there are partnerships that are coming on board. So we will get there. Thank you very much.
A quick group picture, please, for the next part, the panel. We have one more panel, and we will be stepping out of here after our remarks from Nanajwa and also from Kofi Apente. Let me quickly as I can, welcome Jennifer Zabazaja, Bloomberg Television's Chief Africa Correspondent and Anchor, to lead us in the next panel. She would assemble her panel and the conversations will begin. Miss Jennifer, please put your hands together for Miss Jennifer. Thank you very much for coming.
Great. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. So let's get this panel started. I mean, you've spent a day hearing, probably the whole week, hearing about a lot of the initiatives and investments. And this is important for us to talk more about connecting skills, technology, and financial investments of global Africans to support Africa's infrastructure. So let me welcome to the stage our panelists, Ms. Denise Laurent-Mante, Executive Director of the President's Council on Africa Diaspora Engagement. Hello. Kendra Gaither. She is the President of the U.S. Africa Business Center. And finally, Dr. Olivia Kamanzi, President of the Africa Global Chamber of Commerce. Oh, you know what? Oh, Dr. Olivia, do you have a mic as well? There we go. Wonderful. Okay, maybe it's best to start. Every UNGA and global summits and forums, I notice there's a number of investments and commitments that are made. I wonder, based on what the three of you have been experiencing this week, I mean, what gives you hope that we're actually getting closer to bridging the gap between the African diaspora and the continent? Can start for us.
Maybe I'll start. So maybe to start off with a bit about the President's Council on African Diaspora Engagement. In 2022, President Biden hosted African Heads of State in Washington, D.C. for a summit. And with many summits, we often think about deliverables and announcements and what to really announce to make that summit really stand out. And one of the things that we wanted to really put together was finding a unique way for us to widen or diversify our stakeholder engagement with Africa. And so we came up with this African Diaspora Engagement Council in the sense of our African diaspora is a source of strength, right, for the United States. We have this very unique history. We're seeing this, awakening, if I would say, with the diaspora truly going back to the continent, connecting historically, and also connecting economically. And so the diaspora is investing on the continent. They're looking to really connect with their historical roots. And so this council is really a council where we advise the president on how can we engage the African diaspora when it comes to providing recommendations for investing in Africa, our US-Africa foreign policy. And so I think it's a very unique way in us widening our partnerships, right? Using the diaspora as a source of strength when it comes to where can we invest, right? I think we see the many opportunities on the continent, right? And I think that the diaspora should be at the forefront of that, whether it's investing in real estate or, expanding your business. And so I think looking at the diaspora is a key way to do that. And for us, that gives us hope, right? In the sense that we have a diaspora that's tapped into that network to really encourage further economic growth on the continent.
Kendra, I saw you nodding there. Do you agree?
Absolutely. So I'm with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm privileged to serve as president of our U.S. Africa Business Center, which is the Chamber's division for increasing trade and investment between the nations of Africa and the United States. And 2 years ago, the Chamber started after some years of study and research. We established an initiative called Advance with Africa. And the premise behind that initiative is very akin to what the President's Advisory Council is doing. In fact, I've had the privilege of partnering with Denise in a variety of ways, but also specifically within working with the Diaspora Council. We are focused on going out beyond Washington, D.C., where we're located, to talk to diverse business leaders across the United States about the opportunity to connect with partners and opportunity and explore ways to be better connected with the continent in terms of growing trade and investment linkages. I mean, what we have found is that the energy is off the charts. Every time we have engaged an event, which is focused specifically on small and medium enterprises, and particularly those business leaders of the African diaspora, that it's standing room only, be it in Atlanta and Houston and Washington, D.C., online, wherever we have taken this outside of the Beltway, if you will, and even our virtual engagement, we've had robust energy and engagement and considerable feedback from companies who are looking for how to get started, how to be better positioned to leverage the tools that are available. I love that the panel before talked about PDF and how to de-risk as one of those mantras or steps as part of the process. There are tools available offered by the private sector, but also the public sector to help companies who are entering an African market for the first time or scaling from one to the next. And we've seen that energy and that enthusiasm, that hunger for information so that those who are of the diaspora who have an interest have tools to be able to leverage and to contribute to the continent's continued growth.
Dr. Olivia, give us your perspective, especially since the Africa Global Chamber of Commerce has been was created.
Thank you so much. First of all, I have to thank for the organizers, APN, and the African American Institute for having us this afternoon. This initiative is really welcome, especially I see here, Denise, all the work you're doing mobilizing diaspora, me myself being one of diaspora. So I'm really so excited as a founder and the chairman of Africa Global Chamber of Commerce. After spending a couple of years in Rwanda, I was born in Rwanda and then left Rwanda when I was a teenager, moved to Switzerland to America, working in investment banking for 25 years, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup. When I was called by the president of Rwanda to go back as a diaspora to set up the capital market of Rwanda, set up Rwanda Stock Exchange. It really gave me perspective after spending many years here to go back to contribute. So the key I've experienced was the skills we need. We need the diaspora that goes back with some skills, then contribute back home. That's how I went back home. Then being able to set up the Rwanda capital market has helped to make where Rwanda is today. First thing we have been able to achieve was, if you look at Rwanda aviation industry, when I arrived in Rwanda, we had only one airplane. Today we have more than 13 aircrafts flying all over Africa and even beyond Africa. We have a Kigali Convention Center which hosts all global conferences in Rwanda. That was because of the capital market we helped to set up for Rwanda. after that, I returned back to US because I was kind of exhausted. And so, after 3 years, so when you work with the president of Rwanda, Kagame, you have to work hard. After 3 years, I said, let me take a break, go back to US, run my own private business. When I came back, I set up my investment bank based in Chicago. We have an asset management. We manage more than $3 billion US. It's small. This is not my money. It's the money for my clients. Also, once I set up this company, I felt like something is missing. Alone, you can be successful, but together you can go far. That's how the idea for Africa Global Chamber of Commerce was established. We mobilized special connecting our brothers and sisters, African American. We said, let's bring us together as people in diaspora, do something. We created a platform, Africa Global Chamber of Commerce, to bring us together to address those issues we're talking about: infrastructure deficit, healthcare is issue, education, so on and so forth, agriculture for Africa, especially with the focus on youth and women. I'm even excited to be in this podium, learning for women. Even our chamber, 70% on our board are women, to see how we really value women and the young people. So I believe with all the knowledge we can mobilize in diaspora, we go back, that to keep the knowledge, the skills we need for Africa. In addition, most of us, we have worked for corporate America, we have worked for financial institutions, we have access to many managers. As we're speaking right now, I just came from South Africa. We took a group, a trade mission of investors to meet with private equities, money managers, fund managers in South Africa after we met in Atlanta to see how we can close the gap. What we are talking about, 150 billion annual deficit in infrastructure. That's how we can do it. In diaspora, we can do it. African must build Africa, and we have all we need to build Africa we want. If Africa can move forward, we can address the deficit we have in the infrastructure. If we diaspora will step up, we contribute.
Step up. So then where are the gaps then? I mean, is it about de-risking? Is that really what is holding back any sort of additional momentum or channeling of investments?
So I think de-risking has been an issue for several years now, and I think it's still an issue, and there are several resources and avenues to help de-risk. I think investing on the continent, people are just risk averse in general, but looking at the diaspora in particular, right, because they already have strong ties to the continent, if you are able to mobilize the diaspora, it makes it easier for them to invest because of those close ties, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's important to mobilize the diaspora to be at the forefront of the investment train, because of those close connections that actually makes it quite easier. But the work that Kendra and her team is doing helps to provide a network of people who are interested, but also provide the resources that I think can support some of those investments. Similar to youth government, we heard from British Robinson from Prosper Africa. Prosper Africa does a great job providing resources for companies. For example, if there is a Black-owned restaurant in Atlanta and they want to expand their business to Accra or to Kigali, we can provide resources to help do that.
And I'm glad you mentioned those cities, because I find it interesting that a lot of the same cities and countries get most of the investment, right, on the continent. I mean, how do we get away from that and expand that out a bit more?
Well, I'll chime in because I think the answer is the diaspora. In our U.S. Africa Business Center, we have a number of diaspora business leaders who are really visionary in how they're connecting to the continent. They are operating in markets where they have a connection, which is a key statistic that we've learned in our work. And when you look at how U.S. companies, and that's my experience, I know, and with reference to the fact that my panelist is looking at global Africa, my experience is looking at the U.S. experience. And so when you have nearly 15% of the United States population pointing to or having some connection to descendant of the continent, and you have leaders who have a personal connection to a country, they are undaunted by what would be perceived to be the challenges, because there's a purpose or mission-driven angle to their work. And I'll just call out one leader in particular that we've worked with that has been working across West and Central Africa to help connect the nations digitally, building out AI and data and cyber networks. And as there have been less than democratic transitions in some of those nations, the focus has been on the people, and he has continued to bring resources to ensure that the citizens of those countries continue to have the opportunity to thrive. And it's a unique story where he's bringing other companies along, and that's enabling populations to continue to grow and thrive. And those aren't, necessarily the South Africas, the Kenyas, the Nigerias that often become the focus, but it's where you have those ties. And just to close that point out, 96% of the world's population is outside of the United States. When we think about how U.S. companies export or seek partners outside of the U.S., when they're exporting to really 4 or 5 markets. It's Canada and Mexico because they're neighbors, and there's comfort there. It's the UK and Japan. And so if you have 98% of small businesses exporting only to one market or seeking partners in only one market, and it's those 5, then it's been driven by traditional ties, where you have a family or personal connection or know the market. And so in many ways, the diaspora is our superpower in being able to disrupt those patterns and ensure that if a company can get to Japan, they can certainly get, to Ghana, or they can get to Mauritania or Mali or Angola or wherever it may be. And so we have a roadmap through the diaspora on how to do that.
Are there any specific sectors that you're focused on in particular?
So our work is really driven by where our members are active, and so digital is a big one, partnering in the digital transformation of the continent, but agriculture is one, health in particular, a general trade and investment, exports of goods. All of those are traditional ones, but we see continued growth in the creative sectors as well, and knowing that can be a leading edge also of addressing some of those perception issues that may be limiting more investment in the continent.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Olivia, I want you to dig into, not that it's an either and or, but the diaspora here in the U.S. versus a lot of the rest of the world. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of engagement and how it's different, if it is different at all?
Very different. If you look the historical background, United States or North America and South America, we have more diaspora, more than any other continent, right? The US, we're talking around the 15 million. African American, when you go to Brazil, more than maybe 100 million, if I'm not mistaken. So those are big numbers. So therefore, Africa can benefit a lot. I think Africa has a lot of opportunities to tap into this diaspora we have. We're talking about investable assets. In terms of investable assets of African American is close to 1.3 trillion US dollars. If we can just tap into those investable assets and be able to deploy them to Africa, is amazing. I can give you one specific example. We noticed that America is not investing in Africa as we wished to be. There is no such big project you can say this project is being done by US investors or US government. We noticed if we were going to wait, we're going to wait forever. Otherwise, China is coming, Turkey is coming, India is coming, and then US is a bit lagging behind them. I'm sorry to say this for the US Chamber of Commerce. Then we come up with this initiative, what we call Africa Diaspora Investment Series, which will take across the continent of Africa, driven by and led by African diaspora. We launched the first one in Atlanta in last August, 28th through 31st. And then the first focus we said, let's focus on one specific country. We thought because these connections, relationships, background, historical background between US and South Africa. We said, let's start by South Africa. We brought fund managers from South Africa. We brought business from South Africa. We brought investment banks, money managers, all people in finance to meet in Atlanta to start discussing about investing in Africa. Now we start really, the first thing we focus on, let's start by 15 billion as a threshold. That's a minimum, and see how far we can go. Once we finish that conference, we put a couple of deals in pipeline right now are being discussed for matter for disclosure or whatever. I cannot disclose how much money is being discussed, but when we meet next year, I will tell you how much was closed. But some MOUs were signed, but the deals have been closed, but the amount we still have to disclose very, very soon. Now we had a follow-up with trade mission to South Africa. We were in Johannesburg and in Cape Town. We took a group of 15 African diaspora investors to South Africa. We intend to duplicate, even do more. It's just first initiative. That's a kind of initiative we need to duplicate across US, across the continent. So next time maybe we can take another country. So we really think we diaspora, we need to take leadership and lead on these issues we are discussing right now.
And maybe, oh yeah. Okay. And maybe just to wrap up, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty, right, in a number of governments globally, right? US, across the African continent, in the UK. I mean, how does the diaspora ensure continuity no matter who is in public office? I mean, I wonder if there's any bit of what you all are thinking in terms of ensuring that there's no stoppage or setback, no matter who's in office.
So from a government perspective, I think regardless of whoever is in office, one of the ways that we are continuing to do our work is that the council is institutionalized within the Department of State. And so, you know, despite whoever's in office come November or January or so, the work continues as though, you know, our U.S. Africa foreign policy continues. But I think, you know, mobilizing the diaspora is an ongoing effort that doesn't really require someone being in office, right? I think that the key thing is partnership and continuing to, you know, sort of diversify our partners, whether it's working with Chamber of Commerce, working with, you know, AAI, who does great work by mobilizing the diaspora. I think we have to continue to mobilize different partners and diversify our partnerships.
I think that message is very consistently the same. And I would point to consistency as being the key. At the Chamber, we don't get involved in presidential politics in any country around the world because whomever is elected, whomever is in charge, there's a commitment to work with them to achieve the aims of business. If you're an investor, it's not a one-year thing. It's a 3 to 5 year window to think about a project, to line up financing partners, and you're investing for 20, 30 years. That's the continuity in relationships. It's that you've made a commitment that's long-term to a market where you're operating. And so we serve as a continuity and work with whomever is in office to ensure that those relationships continue to thrive.
Dr. Olivier, do you want to close us out? You do. That wasn't a
Yes.
question. I think you're going to.
What I have to say, we're discussing about technology, we're discussing the skills, we're discussing of finance, investments, the closing the gap. The key thing is we need to come together. We should not work in the silos. If we, all of us, with all the field where you are, whether you are in technology, when you healthcare, when in education, you have something to contribute. Especially all those things we are talking about is all about infrastructure, development. So infrastructure is in education, in healthcare, everything we can touch is cross-cutting. To address this infrastructure deficit, we need what we have seen. When you look at here in New York, you have more Ghanaian doctors than in Ghana, right? So if you can mobilize Ghanaian doctors here in New York, just to go to Ghana, you don't have to go back, but do something in Ghana, right? I'll give you an example. When you talk about how many doctors in Houston, Nigerians,
If we can talk to those Nigerian doctors in Houston to go to Nigeria, we can address all those gaps we are experiencing right now. Lastly, we think everything is in us. We have what it takes to solve African problems, to address the infrastructure deficit. When we have to trust in ourselves, what we need is two things. One is the mindset. We change our mindset. The second is stop complaining, just do it. Thank you.
That's a good message to end on. Thank you all for listening, and thank you.
Events and forum like this, when we go out, we tend to sometimes forget some of the things that were said, and to put it all together for us so that to save you from all the embarrassment. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's welcome the Executive Director for the Africa Prosperity Network, Nana Adjoa Hackman, for the key takeaways and call to action.
Thank you, Refa. Excellencies, distinguished special guests, our partners. I see Africa America Institute, Mr. Kofi Apenting. I see Badea still in the room with us. I see Buena Vista Homes, AFDB, all our sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you. The concept note for this year's edition of the Global Africa Forum promised that the outcome of these discussions will be for stakeholders to proffer bold remedies to the canker of infrastructure deficits and map out investment and fund sourcing strategies to scale up and propel shared prosperity for Africa and Africans alike. Having witnessed today's remarks and discussions and listen to the various remarks that were delivered earlier, I would say that we have achieved just that. And even more, we've heard about so many projects that are underway and projects in the pipeline. It means that we are already on course to bridging that gap, and we will not rest until we have done so. Therefore, it is my great pleasure and a real honor to deliver to you in as crisp a format as I can the key takeaways from tonight's discussions. And of course, in the coming days, we'll be sharing with you the comprehensive outcome document from everything that was discussed today, so you don't have to remember everything. In all, there have been 4 clear themes that have emerged from the remarks and discussions this evening. Theme 1, connect the skills, technology, and capital of global Africans to the development of key sectors on the continent. In all our panel discussions, we've heard about enhancing collaboration between Africa and its diaspora to leverage specialized skills in sectors like healthcare, education, and digital technology. 2, we've also heard about increasing facilitation of technology transfer from the diaspora to support Africa's development in key industries. mobilize diaspora investment into critical infrastructure projects across energy, housing, transportation, and health. We have resolved here to structure programs for knowledge sharing and capacity building, integrating diaspora expertise with local talent to strengthen key sectors. Theme 2, we have resolved to encourage global investments, especially global African investors, to capitalize on Africa's single market size of 1.4 billion. And we're told this is growing too. Under this theme, the following were resolved. Boost foreign direct investment from global African investors drawn by Africa's expanding single market and its opportunities. B, create streamlined pathways for the diaspora to invest in African startups and enterprises, reducing barriers to entry. C, accelerate strategic investments in high potential sectors like renewable energy, fintech, and agribusiness to maximize the benefits of Africa's single market. Improve investor confidence in Africa's markets through policy alignment, tax incentives, and stable economic frameworks. Theme 3 was clearly making public-private partnerships for infrastructure projects more attractive for investors. And under this theme, we have resolved to do the following: develop more favorable policies and tax incentives to encourage public-private partnerships infrastructure. B, create risk-sharing mechanisms to make infrastructure investments more secure and appealing to private investors. Promote cross-border infrastructure projects to facilitate regional integration and connect African markets. And finally, use innovative financing solutions, including blended finance, to scale up PPPs for large-scale infrastructure projects. Theme 4, ladies and gentlemen, advancing with economic powers like the USA, and there was a lot about that on the final panel, to ensure policy frameworks reflects on the need of Africa's large-scale infrastructure development and integration. Under this theme, the following are resolved: to increase cooperation with global economic powers, example, the USA and EU, to align policies with Africa's long-term infrastructure goals, strengthen partnerships between African nations and global financial institutions to secure funding for large-scale projects, facilitates trade agreements and policy frameworks that enhance Africa's infrastructure and connectivity on a global scale. Enhance advocacy, finally, enhance advocacy for African infrastructure needs at international forums, ensuring Africa's developmental priorities are represented globally. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I dare say, and I believe that I speak for my chairman, Mr. Gabi Asari Ochre-Daku, and the entire APN team, as well as the Africa American Institute, that at the end of today's series of discussions, our work in relation to APD 2025 has been well cut out for us. The outcome of today will dovetail into the program to be held in Accra in January, and I know that given our combined teams and our track record, we will not rest until we have an integrated market that allows for free movement of people, goods, and services in a borderless Africa of countless economic opportunities. We thank you all exceedingly for your contribution to today's outcome. We heard it said just now that alone you can be successful, but together we can fly. We are truly grateful for your partnership. And on that note, permit me to end by re-echoing our chairman's invitation at the beginning of the session for you all to make a date with us in Accra in January 2025, the 30th of January to the 1st of February 2025 for the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2025. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Nanajwa Heckman. She's our Executive Director for the Africa Prosperity Network. And standing on that, I'd also want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Golden Coast Developers, Def Traco, Buena Vista Homes, JL Properties, Delta Airlines. We also have our institutional and knowledge partners. We have the UNDP, we have the United Nations, we have the Afri-Exim Bank, we also have BADEA, we have the Africa Business Council, we have the AFDB, Africa Soft Power, we have the Oxford Business Group, the Africa America Institute, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Africa Legal Associates, 3-Year Africa Summit, Chartered Institute Realtors, and the Chamber of Real Estate, and many more, and you as well. And we'll give you more of our sponsors. But before we go, of course, we started with the Africa Prosperity Network with a welcome address, and this would not have been possible without this great partnership with the Africa America Institute. I'd like to invite the president of AAI, Mr. Kofi Appington, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's welcome him.
Madam Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and valued partners. As we conclude this important event on mobilizing global African investment for Africa's infrastructure needs, I thank you for engaging in thoughtful dialogue about policy and pathways to meeting Africa's infrastructure needs and our shared future. Whether in transportation, energy, or digital connectivity, the infrastructure we build today lays the groundwork for a sustainable tomorrow and builds our influence on the global stage. Today, we've discussed powerful examples of successful investments and policies that not only transform economies, but also unlock this opportunity. As we advocate for increased investment, we must emphasize the importance of economic sovereignty, an idea that we at the Africa America Institute consider foundational to the next phase of African growth. Each nation and region must have the agency to define its own development pathways, ensuring that investments align with needs and priorities. This means fostering an environment where both local and global investors feel confident to commit their resources, while also ensuring that these investments contribute to self-sustaining economies. That's because infrastructure is about more than just roads, bridges, and internet cable. It's about a shared vision that can only be developed by fostering relationships, sharing knowledge, and building networks, not just between governments and investors, but among ourselves as African nations, as entrepreneurs, and as a global Africa. By fostering collaboration, we can strengthen our collective voice and enhance our bargaining power in global investments. Economic sovereignty is about unity. When we can connect with each other, we create a powerful network that can advocate for fair terms and drive investments that genuinely serve our people. Infrastructure development cannot just be about individual projects. It must be about our shared future. By investing wisely, integrating our efforts, and connecting people and ideas, we can meet Africa's infrastructural needs while deepening our shared sense of economic sovereignty. Together, we can pave the way for a brighter, more connected future for Africa, one where the continent and global Africa not only thrive, but lead in shaping our destiny. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Appington. I must also say that apart from the Africa America Institute, this has been powered by the Africa Intercontinental Free Trade Area, AFTA, and of course the Pan-African Payment Settlement Systems, PAPS, and of course our kind sponsors, and I've gone through them.
So on behalf of the Executive Chairman of Africa Prosperity Network, on behalf of the Board of Directors and the Advisory Council, we want to register our sincere appreciation to everyone who participated in today's event. This will be the way we end the event. And to tell you that we ended right on the time we set out to end, 7 p.m. Thank you very much.
And of course, dinner is served as well. And see you in Accra in 2025 in January for the Africa Prosperity Dialogue. You can't miss it. See you in Accra.